Good morning. Father Michael here. Overslept a little bit today because I was just exhausted. Last week, I bought a small battery-operated chainsaw because on the property that I just bought, there are a bunch of sapling trees growing around the perimeter. They weren't planted intentionally. They just kind of ended up there. They sprouted and no one ever bothered to remove them when they were small and could have just been pulled up by hand. Well, now they're growing. And the problem is that they're growing right up against the fence line, the privacy fencing. So unless I get rid of them, they're going to continue to grow and they'll eventually wipe out my fencing. So a couple days ago, before the monsoons started here, I'm outside with that handy little toy. And as I'm cutting down these saplings, some of them are, a good 3.5 inches in diameter. So they've been there for a minute. As I'm cutting them down, I realize that about half of them are mulberry trees, which means, unfortunately, that just cutting down the trunk is not going to fix my problem, because those stumps will continue to sprout new growth until the end of planet Earth. That's just how they're programmed. Mulberries are notoriously hard to get rid of. I have fought this battle before. And even if they're small enough where you think you can dig up all of the roots, man, even if you leave a little piece of root, like 2 inches in the ground, by golly, that little piece of root will find a way to sprout, and it will continue to be annoying, continue to grow. So that's my challenge right now, my practical challenge. I have to somehow outthink the biological imperative of these mulberry trees. In the book of Job, chapter 14 is what I'm thinking of, verse 7. Job is talking to God. He's talked to his friends. His friends are of no use to him in his, struggles by this point in the story. And so Job is now complaining to God, and he's explaining to God what God already knows, that human life is short and brutal and depressing and painful, and all of our best intentions come to nothing. Our life is simply stunted, and then it's over, and there's no coming back from death. Death has the final word. Well, verse 7 says, this is Job speaking to God, hey, at least there's hope for a tree, because if I cut it down, it will sprout again, and its new shoots won't ever fail. Kind of like those mulberry trees in my yard. So in my sermon yesterday, which you can catch on the Grace St. John's United Church of Christ Facebook page, because I broadcast live there and also on the Holy Redeemer Old Catholic Community page. But in that sermon yesterday, I referred to a story that I told you all last week about those night-blooming jasmine that I saw blooming the night my house burned. many years ago. And the upshot of the sermon was pretty simple, that the night blooming jasmine blooms for no particular reason other than that is what it does. That's what it does. There is no rhyme or reason for it. It is a survivor. And it continues to bloom and to send forth its scent, whether or not anyone notices, whether or not anybody appreciates its efforts or not, it's irrelevant. It's a survivor. It's a survivor, like all the natural world. Those of us who are survivors, and you know who you are, and I think I'm one of those. You know, life can deal a series of tragic blows to a survivor, and nonetheless, we continue to just pick ourselves up and dust ourselves off and just keep doing it. There are a couple spiritual takeaways, I think, today, because like those night blooming jasmine in my yard, when the house burned, like those mulberry trees, those saplings that I've cut down, but are still making a plan for a spectacular return in my yard. Each one of us has that same biological imperative within us, not only to survive, but to thrive as well. Now, to be sure, sometimes we see the challenges of this life before they actually hit us. When we're a student, we have to take a test. We have to take the I-step. We see that coming. We have to study up for our driver's test and or our state graduation equivalency exam. And then as we get older, we have other things that we see coming, other challenges. We have to get our state licensure exam passed. We have to pay our taxes. That's my other struggle this week. But other times, we don't see those struggles coming our way. We're completely blindsided. We lose someone unexpectedly. Our retirement plan changes, and suddenly we retire early, and everything is, in upheaval. We lose money on our investment portfolio. Our dog gets sick, etc., etc., etc. But in all of this life, we need to resist that temptation to believe that bad things are happening to us because we somehow deserved it, that we somehow messed up, and that God needs to just open a can of whoop ass on us to teach us a lesson. The universe does not work that way. Karma isn't a thing. Sorry. Karma is a religious doctrine. It is not a universal principle of science or physics. The bottom line here is that we all face situations and even seasons that have a negative impact on our ability to hope. And there are times when we lose sight of hope altogether. Many times we try to change our situation, and it's just not enough. People that we were counting on to get us to the finish line of this life are, for one reason or another, not going to be there. But that biological, evolutionary, God-given imperative to survive and thrive is real, and it remains true for us no matter what. So, in those times when we feel like just throwing up our hands and giving up, let's just call on the name of God. Let's just surrender that impossible situation to God. We just need the faith of a mustard seed. It ain't much, but it's more than sufficient. We can cling to the tiniest shred of hope that God will indeed see us through. Maybe not the way we prefer, maybe not the way we had counted on, maybe not even our third or fourth choice. Nonetheless, God will see us through. I don't know much, but that much I know for sure. Pray with me. Loving giver of life, sustainer of our existence, we come into your presence in this moment of prayer, grateful for the miracle of life. Some days it is, to be sure, a severe miracle. And yet, we thank you for it. For all of us who are struggling today to hold on to just a shred of hope, be with us. Show us a little flicker of light in our darkness. And if we feel like just giving up today, remind us that like those mulberry trees you have created, we too will always send forth fresh shoots of life, that we are indestructible, that your love carries us and will always carry us, even into a future we can't imagine. Help us today to be a smiling face of hope for the people we meet today, because we know many of them are also struggling. So help us to be a little more kind, a little more understanding, so that together all your people might someday stand in your presence and sing your praise for having gotten us through. Amen. And now may the God of peace and the God of hope be with you today and all those you love, with the blessing of our mighty God, Otca i Synu i Świętemu Duchu.